Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Chicago Whovians United YouTube channel. My name is Gordon. I am the lead organizer of the group, and welcome to our virtual panel on War of the War Games. I will introduce everyone in a moment, but just what we decided to engage in a very unique experiment, which is we all decided to watch the original black and white war games, and we just finished watching the color edit. Because one, we roll like that. But I wanted to invite all of you. We do virtual and in-person meetups in the Chicago area. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, uh, not Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube. We'll have plenty of fun little follow-ups in the links in the comments and whatever as every YouTuber says, like, share, subscribe, go for it. So let's go around and introduce ourselves first name only. Let's start with Harmon.
Hello, I'm Harmon.
Hello, I'm Barbara.
Hi, I'm Ruth.
Okay, well, let's start. We've just finished watching the color edit. What do we think?
The word edit is an understatement. This is badly chopped up, in my opinion. Um, the black and white version, I think, Gordon, you would agree with me, it drags in places. It is kind of slow, especially at the beginning, but this is not a good job they've done. Colorizing it is great, but it's all broken up. Characters just arrive in the story and you have no idea who they are. Um, the introduction of the modern music doesn't work. That's my opinion. And I'm disappointed because my going into this, when I was watching the black and white, I thought to myself, colorize this, turn it into a mini series, and put it on streaming, and keep the original story exactly intact as it is, even with the dragging places.
Hmm.
What are other people's thoughts?
I immediately was like, oh, the pacing for this is ridiculously fast. And I hated that. And then Pancho Villa's like suddenly appeared, and I'm like, they cut Pancho Villa's introduction, and he's like one of the fun characters. And I was just like, I mean, immediately I was like, okay, maybe like a 3 hour edit I could see, but this was like to take something that starts off at 4 hours and cut it down to an hour and a half. It's like you lose so much.
I happen to
I'm like,
think anybody watching this, even if they hadn't watched the original, would recognize that it's all chopped up.
Hmm.
it completely like the flow of it is so like you can tell that it's been edited and chopped and that you're missing pieces. It doesn't flow right. I
Exactly.
mean, to cut scenes and maybe like pauses and like shorten it, but like things like there's things that could have been done, but the way they edit it, it's just like, oh my gosh, this is bad. And the original, despite being 4 hours and like being slow at times, it does really like flow and have a pace, and it is fun to watch.
Hmm.
Carstairs and Lady Jennifer make a comment early on about the conversation they had about not remembering things. Problem is, we didn't see that conversation in the colorized version, and we did in the black and white. And it's bizarre that you would, I guess, today's Doctor Who people wouldn't like the original sonic screwdriver. You'll notice every use of it is missing in this story.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I caught the missing conversation because I was like, but no, they talked and what? Yeah, there was like so much cut.
And how they find the map. The whole bit where the doctor is putting explosives to blow the safe open to get the map. That's his character. That's how do I put it? That's to me was a relevant scene.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I know, like I said, like the thing I noticed, one of the things I noticed was Pancho Villa just suddenly shows up, and I'm like, no, like Pancho Villa is like hilarious. And I'm sure they did brown face, but it was also like you kind of cut like this great character of color because they really did. If you watch the original cut, like they really did try to have different voices, different characters where like they were making an effort not to have all to have diversity. So, you've got Lady Jennifer, you've got Zoe and the Doctor talk quite a bit, and like the Doctor constantly throughout is like giving Zoe like props for like figuring things out. And she has a big arc where she's like, hang on, like she gets talking to and like she remembers all this information. So she's like, I can tell you all the resistant fighters and their names.
Sure, because her whole interrogation is missing.
Yeah, her whole interrogation, which was like awesome because that's like a really big starring moment for Zoe, and it just shows off her intelligence. I mean, we have
And the
Flash.
whole way that, and which is also the whole way the security chief finds out the Doctor is a Time Lord and that they even came here in a space-time machine. The
Yeah,
things you're being introduced to things, and if you're watching this and you've never seen the original, you're like, how did they find that out? Where did this come from? Where did that come from?
yeah, it's so much cutting.
And I'm going to say the soundtrack for the original War Games, yes, some of that music is annoying. However, the way they changed it here doesn't work. And this is someplace I'm an expert with. I collect the music, I listen to all the music of the show, and I recognized, I mean, after the war chief is killed, you hear the sound effects for regeneration after his carcass is dragged away. I heard that because they're trying to hint to us. And all the use of the music for the master to
Hmm.
suggest that the war
Mhm.
chief is the master, um, which maybe he is and maybe he isn't. And I don't think it matters for this story. I don't care, actually. I'm sorry, am I starting to sound annoyed? Because I found
No, you
this
have every right.
this was annoying to watch, and I actually think some years ago, they did Journey's End, Stolen Earth. Those episodes are longer than an hour if you watch them properly. But there's a version of them where they've been edited to fit within an hour. And if you watch the originals and you watch the edited versions, you immediately see, like when Davros is having his fun with the Doctor, you immediately see how things are skipping ahead in those scenes where he's interrogating Rose and the Doctor. The same problem is here. It's obvious.
It's annoying
Mm.
because I thought I fell asleep or something when they went from, they were starting to gather the people together, and then all of a sudden they were trying, the Doctor was bringing them in, and what happened to all of it? It it didn't, it was, I thought either fell asleep or something
And
because
there's a very critical thing in this story. The whole resistance, meeting those people, and the whole way they draw all the guards away from the central headquarters so that they're vulnerable. That's why the Doctor brings just the resistant leaders there, not just to save their lives, but because that's really all he needs now. Because in the original, they take their time to show you. See, that to me, this is at the end, the Doctor has to have help to send all these people home. There's only one evidence that it's a large number of people when Smythe orders 5,000 specimens for reinforcements. But we're talking, it was hinted here that there was like hundreds of thousands or millions of people here. These people had an entire planet that was divided up into time zones. The fact that they're on another planet, you learn that throughout the original story. Here, it's just sort of told you after the fact.
Yeah, it's because the whole, the scene where Zoe opens the frame and she sees the telecommunications thing. If you look at episode one of the original longer War Games, and yeah, links to Tubi and YouTube down below, so you watching can go watch. You're introduced to it. You watch this first episode, you think you don't know where the story's going because it introduces it very literally. I think within like 15 minutes is Smythe's communicating, and then there's the first firing squad sequence. In this in the edit version, you get to it. How does she know to look under the frame? Or there was a scene later on where she had looked and seen it, or and I you know I it's something I've
Oh, go on, Gordon.
and I was about to say I part of this I've watched this before today, and um I'll be honest, I think it sucks on toast. It's but it's also something, and this is a bit. Some of it I've talked about when we watched Dot and Bubble, and I've hinted at it. But there seems a pattern to uh, Russell T Davies version two. Back before the anniversary specials, there was the children need special where Davros is played by a guy in a suit, the original actor, Julian Bleach. And Russell T Davies says, this is our new Davros. This is how I want Davros to be remembered for representation. That's fine. Um, but it feels like, um, and Russell T Davies has said publicly he wants to do a Hooniverse. So yeah, that's why you had the Tales from the TARDIS series. That's why you had the initial 2 year, yeah, for 2023 was the Daleks edited in color, which is a 90-minute edit of a 7-part story that I really don't care about. So when I watched it, I thought it was okay. It's a concise version of a story I don't care about. Um, Russell Davies has also said that in his mind, when the Doctor by generated, every version of the Doctor in the past by generated. So you've got an older Colin Baker with that emerged from McCoy, from Sylvester McCoy, and looking at this, it stylistically the edit feels a lot like a lot of Russell T Davies era episodes. The original. It's just hit, 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 hit. I'm not, and let me finish. And it feels like um, this is like the first. I wonder who this is for, because I wouldn't show this. Based on everyone's feedback and my own feeling, I would never show this do a screening of this because why would you do that? It's annoying. But it does feel like, I kind of feel like Russell T Davies is maybe having a little too heavy a hand on, on, on the series. It's almost like it feels like he's trying to get the series to conform to his vision, whereas instead of respecting what the actual narrative says, um, does anyone else have that feeling, or is that just me?
This was for the modern audience. This was for the audience that's only watched a new show.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to bring something like the War Games to them in a way that they won't like it unless it's like the modern show, which is a sad commentary if somebody
Mm-hmm.
thinks that way.
I don't like that for the choices they offer the Doctor. They give him the new Who doctors. They give him Tennant and
Yeah.
you know,
And you
it,
know what,
it
Barbara,
just
there's
doesn't make sense.
Barbara, I don't know about you, but when I watched the War Games, every time I see that last episode, one of the faces, the drawings they put up, one of those faces, I swear, is Peter Davidson.
Mm-hmm.
And that is exactly what I was expecting them to show. That would have at least been, but yeah, this was not even that kind of continuity. And I would have enjoyed them showing the faces of Tom Baker, Peter Davidson. But frankly,
Mm-hmm.
this is what bothered me is, oh, nobody will like that. That's so crappy the way they did it back in the 60s. We have to do something to, again, I'm going back to the music. I could tell when they were using the modern music, when they were using the music that went with this, when they jazzed up the music that went with this. I'm sorry, music is an area of my expertise. And I just was like,
Mm-hmm.
why are you ruining this? Why anybody watching this can, I already said it, can tell this has been thrown together.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I feel like all along it was done to attract a modern audience, but I actually think they've hurt the show with this. It's that crappy an edit. I think it actually does harm.
I could do a better job, and I'm not that good at editing video.
Yeah, I mean in watching the original, and for people who complain, oh, it's too long at 4 hours, you can actually cut it up and watch it and like do what I did, watch it in hour-long segments. It's like two or three episodes at a time over several nights. And
That's
but
why
Yeah.
go ahead.
that's why I said, Gordon. I mean, take an example of Russell Davies doing Children of Earth. That was a miniseries of 5 episodes. This is 5 hour. If you do this in such a way, if you want to throw in some scenes of the Sidrat going through, which was unnecessary, but if you want to throw some modernish things in there, you can easily colorize this, keep the original story, and just do a 5-part miniseries. Make it a streaming. I still say make it a streaming event. I mean, we animate, and when they animate things like Evil of the Daleks, right? They animate that one, and they throw things into that story, like something in the background to connect it with the modern series. Now that's unnecessary, in my opinion, but you can do little things like that if you must, but keep the original story. Now, I will suggest one thing that they could skip. There is one point where the doctor and they end up behind German lines, and you go through the same thing all over again, where, oh, they must be spies. And he convinces the guy with the sonic screwdriver where he's removing the screw from the gun and putting it back in. That particular scene that whole scene could be skipped. There's no need to go through a second and third time where. And another thing, in Smythe's office, the whole marching them left, right, left, right, left, right is overdone in the original. You only had to do that once. But the whole court-martial scene was messed up because where he's turning to each member with the glasses and telling them that they're spies, he says they're spies. That was all necessary part of the storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to go back to what I was talking about earlier, and I'm agreeing with you, Harmon. When you look at the way it's paced, and you consider that this was written because they suddenly had 10 weeks to fill, they had actors leaving, they needed, they basically told Karen Sticks, who's the assistant script editor at this time, we need 10 weeks, we need 10 scripts, we need to bring everything to an end, and we need it tomorrow. But when you look at it in that, watching an hour at a time, first, you see where the plot always moves forward. There's never any, there are little bits where you can do filler. And for those who complain this is too long, if you could watch an entire season of Disney of the Disney series, of that first Disney series in one gulp, you can watch the War Games. And especially if you take out Space Babies, because that way it just becomes a much easier season to watch.
Boy, we're not going to hear the end of that, are we?
No. And for those of you who are ride or die with Russell T, who think, oh, well, this season, Disney maybe will let off the shackles and let him run. Remember, he wrote that episode. He has claimed to write that episode. He embraces Space Babies. And I
He's
think
proud of that.
Mm-hmm. And I think with this edit, it really, it's why I can't really, it has been suggested that I focus on the new series because there's more people who like it. When you're watching, to me, Doctor Who's like any other classic television, like Twilight Zone, even something like Columbo, which has gained a little bit more prominence. You have to adjust your expectations to the time it was, and you can argue the merits. And I think the full version is the better version because you not only get more of a story, but I think of this as like the transition from old Doctor Who, it really is a transitional period from black and white Doctor Who to color Doctor Who. Because one of the co-writers on this is Malcolm Hulke. And Hulke, I've been re-listening to episodes of Doctor Who: The Writers' Room that have focused on Malcolm Hulke for another potential future meetup. Hint, hint, viewers. And and by the way, Doctor Who, the writers' room, they're doing the new series now, so throw that in your throw that in your podcasters. But um, Hulk is this is about ideas. It's about it becomes very adult. Consider that at the time, the story before this was the Space Pirates, which is basically the space babies of 1960s Who.
Oh my.
I mean, it is rumored to be one of the worst, if not the worst, classic series entry. But Hulk, they're dealing with things about war, and really, I think one of the themes about this, part of it is just how expendable people are, how some will think to expend other human beings.
It it's basically like the modern equivalent would be doing a Vietnam if Modern Who did a Vietnam story
Mhm.
um now, or even like Iraq, like the Iraq War. I would say Vietnam because Vietnam would be like the grandparents of viewers, and Iraq is like the parents.
Mhm.
But it's basically doing a Vietnam episode aimed at the generation that grew up that went to war during Iraq.
Well, I think too, this might have been, I don't know if that was on Hulk's mind. I do think it's interesting in reading about some of the history. I know one of the reasons why they avoided handling World War II, because by this point, they knew about the Holocaust, and trying to do that, integrate that into this story would have been a little too, yeah, too close. And
It
the reason
it's a
why they
little
used World War One was that World War One, like, had a significant impact on the British mentality.
I think
Um,
also it helps that just, here's this thing, the war games and the war to end wars.
mhm,
I think
yeah.
there's a message right there as well.
I think though too is when you literally have a group of people that had PSTD still from World War II and it's still so relevant. I mean, we're talking about a difference of like what, 40 years? No, not even 40 years, like 30 years. That's why I said like it would be the equivalent of talking about Vietnam, like Iraq War, I think would be the closest for my generation, and that I literally met people in college and like have known people that um were in high school when 9/11 happened and then signed up for the army,
mhm,
and people that come back or like they come back and they have like PSTD, and we just don't talk about it. And
mhm.
I think it's really kind of that thing of World War II was still such a fresh gash. World War One is a little bit easier to talk about.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
It's
and
interesting
I
you bring
really,
up, it's interesting you mentioned Vietnam. Think about when this story was done.
yeah,
Mhm.
Vietnam would have been fresh. The Cold War, I think that's why it hits too, because it's really a critique of the Cold War and how much it was heating up during that time. Cuban Missile Crisis would have been like 62, 63, I think. I can't remember. It was during Kennedy's time. But yeah, Vietnam would have been really heating up. I mean, things I noticed watching the original is I really like the amount of diversity. Like we have a black Union soldier coming to save them, and I'm like, they got a black American to like come and like I mean the casting for that must have took some think, but it's like deliberate things like that. The way Zoe plays such a role. Um, there's we have a cut in the new episode, but we talked about how in the old episode, the original cut, there's a part where she is being like shown all the deserters, and I mean you see a variety of men and women, and then she's the one who remembers all the names. It's like it's this person, it's this person, and then one of the like key figures of helping them is Pancho Villa, which I'm like right away I'm like, oh, they did some brown face, but I'm like their heart is in the right place.
Let me play the well actually card. The character's name is actually Arturo Villa, not Pancho
Yeah,
Villa.
yeah.
I'm not saying, and yeah, I can, that's one where I can see, yeah, you might want to edit him out because he's a white actor in brown face where I could see where, yeah, maybe we don't want to, and a lot of his
Yeah.
is like it's the typical stereotype of, yeah, well, okay, people watching Mexican Bandit stereotype. I'll just leave
Yeah.
that there.
But I will give them credit that they make that character a hero, which in America
Mhm.
at the time, that person is, I mean, even in America now,
One of the things I like
that's a
was
villain.
the one character who can't, where the mental, when the guy with the monocle is using it on
Yeah.
the black character to get him back under control, and he's like, that stuff don't work on me. I'm like, this is great. The one guy who's the one, because there's later in the black and white version, there's a scene where he's is taking control of one of the resistance members, and this is one who is truly, I like that. Oh, this is someone's strength of character, strength of will, can't be controlled. I liked that it was a black person.
Yeah, it's
um
like it was like this guy is like, I don't give into this. What, like, no. And the guy's like, what? He's like, yeah. And it's like, yeah, of course. You plucked a black soldier. But yeah, like they really did try to put in some diversity where they could.
Yeah,
Like you could tell there was attempt to be quote unquote woke. Like to have diversity, to not have it just be white men.
mhm.
And I applaud them for their effort and their attempt. And, once again, this is like 69. So, like, people were conscious of that. And it's not just new who that is, quote unquote, woke.
Yeah.
This
Well,
is something they,
yeah. Well, it's funny because like Hulk is one of those writers who tends to focus less on he focuses on people and conversations. He's not a big, um, well, to use 1960s terms, this Doctor Who is relevant, which
yeah,
is, um, but he's also done a lot more. And he was a strong leftist. He was an active member of the British Communist Party. So this is a guy who is Lefty McLeftenstein. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think, and I think that's one of the things that he always reminds us is that these are people, but that, you've got the war chief and the warlord and, they don't see them as people. They see them as expendable because all they are just, hey, let's put them together and they're going to fight the galaxy because, well, it's Doctor Who. We don't need to focus on that.
I,
But
I'll also, there's kind of a tone of racism and
yeah.
that they literally are like, okay, they're the most vicious species. Like they really equate them to being like they're the most warlike, working the toughest ones.
Hmm.
Um, and it's the species because we just see them as props and machine. Like, it's a justification for like a way of justifying getting what we want. And we like this species because quote unquote they are the most warrior race. That's how
Okay.
they saw us.
Okay. Well, let me get to the most controversial part of this edit. And I expect there to be a lot of contention, a lot of fighting, a lot of back and forth. The regeneration scene. What did we think?
I did not like it. I did not like who they gave him as choices. I did not like the way they did the regeneration scene. Admittedly,
and and it's unnecessary. Again, somebody feels, oh, nobody, everybody want the second Doctor finally deserves a regeneration. The regeneration scenes all have to be like the modern version of the show now.
I when I watched the original War Games, my only thing was I'm like, I really wish my life critique was like, oh, I wish they like literally had like the ending, the beginning, the first few seconds of that their doctors like just added on to the modern version. Like that was like the one thing where I'm like, yeah, I kind of see you guys' point. Like they did a little too much with that regeneration. And I'm like, I would have been fine where if they just at the end tacked on the third doctor like the cut to color and it's the third doctor coming out that last like 30 seconds. That's all I
Mhm.
needed. I literally did not need you to add anything else. I literally just wanted the last 30 seconds to be the beginning of the Third Doctor's first story. So like that we have that cut from black and white to suddenly color. I think that's just a really cool transition,
Hmm.
and I think it
Yeah,
would have been fun to see.
no, that I agree with you there. If you
They
know,
took it too
and
far.
right, they had because again they felt they had to every people want to see that regeneration scene, and I'm like, not really. I don't understand how it is that big a deal.
Well, I think I may have an answer, which is the regeneration sequence was originally created by as a fan creation by someone who the
Hmm.
account is Confession Dial, and they released it, I think, in 2023, and it's almost beat for beat, except for the Vortex special effects are a little different. Um, and I think this is like the Capaldi intro sequence where a fan created it, somebody caught it and said, "Oh, we could use that." And again, it feels like too heavy to me. It's too heavy a hand because the original reason you didn't see Troughton regenerate into Pertwee was that Pertwee hadn't been signed to play the role yet. I think this was taped. I think it was episode 8 was being transmitted. I think they signed. I think they signed transmitted while this was being produced, and then Pertwee was signed on like maybe the week that episode 10 came out. So they couldn't do that. But it does feel. But yeah, they kind of took that, and it does feel, and it goes with the master, the master music playing with the war chief. And some of the music cues where it's pretty much get it, hey, it's the master, which even Terrence Dicks, the guy who co-wrote it, has said both in interviews and he even wrote an entire novel where he said, no, this is not the master. It's a proto master if you want to be specific, but it does feel like it's that um, if they're trying to reach a modern audience, um, you don't need to treat them like idiots. I think you can end with that, especially since the music and the cuts to external Gallifrey are so superfluous because in that moment,
Yeah.
this is the Doctor losing. This is the Doctor after all this time. He doesn't save the day. He doesn't, he's taking care of the situation, but he's getting punished for it. And I think going in, forcing a regeneration just because you have a check off. Well, and I think one of the reasons why Doctor Who, I think, as a series works so well is that you have these nice little gaps where you can inject, you can inject some imagination. You don't necessarily have to worry about like, well, why is it in this story William Hartnell has one heart, yet in Spearhead from Space the Doctor has two hearts? Well, you know, ultimately it's fiction with imaginary never people doing stuff.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is that you have these kind of gaps, and to me, it just feels like having the triumphant music or seeing Earth phase in or the shots of future doctors. And I really wish they should use classic doctors in that the um that won't do it all would have been they would have cut to a picture of Pertwee. Because I think one of the first lines that Pertwee says in Spearhead is, wait, that's not me at all. But then goes, oh yeah, actually I'm kind of good looking.
Hmm.
But it feels like, and again, that's why I kind of feel like RTD Mark II, it feels like there's too heavy a hand. It feels like, okay, we're going to force you to, this is like the new canon. And it's like, you know, for people who complain about the old series being, bad special effects, everything else, hey, name a cop show you've watched. Um, a cop show you've watched. Name classic Star Trek. There are a lot of things that even when they redid the special effects in the early 2000s, there's still a lot that is kind of creaky, and you kind of have to accept it as television of its time. If you look at the CGI with the initial CGI with Eccleston and David Tennant, the early 2000 stuff, looks a little creaky. If this is the last Disney Who and it ends up going back to the BBC, they're going to need to scale back. Like we don't need vast cosmic vistas. All we need is good storytelling. And I think this is one of those efforts where you can see the holes because it's like the whole, you know, we've all talked about the sequence in Germany where they're going through the same thing. Well, I think that's part of the point is that they are going through the same issues. Um, and they are dealing with trying to figure out what this mystery is. When you watch the original, and for those who've been watching since for now, I think you've probably guessed. Yeah, we're spoiling a 45-year-old story. If that bothers you, you can link in the bottom. Link down. You can watch it yourself. But the truth is, it, you've got the casual introduction of the word Time Lords in episode 6. In episode 3, you've got the Doctor and the war chief looking at each other and like, oh, we know each other. Episode 6, you hear Time Lords, and it's very casually mentioned. And then 8 is the confrontation between the war chief and the Doctor. And then episodes 9 and 10 are 9 is the resolution, and 10 is a little bit more of a chase around. But you kind of need that. You need that space because this is the end of a series. It's also the end of an era, but it's the end of a series. And
But I think the other thing about the war games is the length of this thing. You have to, by the time you get to the end, you understand why it's too big a task for the Doctor to send all these people
right,
home. It
Yeah.
feels like it because there has been this slow buildup and the slow realization. I mean, first when they go through that mist and it's the Romans, you're thinking, okay, they're on Earth, but somebody is manipulating all the wars on Earth.
Mhm.
No, they're not even on Earth. I mean, and it just the slow progression of it. And I agree with you. Even the part where they're going through the same thing again and again with the everybody thinks they're spies. Multiple times it was necessary to see the mental control these people had over the humans, not just once. You needed to see how they had to use it constantly in some cases to keep them in line. So that then it made more sense why the processing machine was being worked on. And the whole concept that there was a resistance here was lost in the colorized version.
yeah, because
Yeah, you know what
you see
also they
That whole
missed?
business about trying to get the General Smythe to destroy those controls, why bother to show us that? That was significant because the Doctor is able to use those controls later on to put a time zone barrier or mist around that chateau, create a base of operations for the Resistance. I mean, huge. The story is messed up in this colorized version.
Yeah, and they even kind of limited the importance of the fog because I really love the fog because I kept like going back and thinking about it and being like, oh yeah, it's the fog of war. Like clearly
and
like the fog of war. Like it's
mhm.
I was
Yeah,
just like, this is clever.
and
And
yeah, and also at the time there was a lot of gas warfare because World War
yeah.
One, first with tanks, with chemical weapons. So it would make sense. You've got this rolling fog, so it's like, oh,
And
okay,
also
that.
Brigadoon. It
Mhm.
made me think of Brigadoon. I'm like, oh, I love it too because it's also kind of the throwback. It's kind of a
But
throughout to
also,
like Brigadoon.
and I know they had this in the colorized version, but it didn't make as much sense as it did in the black and white when they're talking about maybe there's a gas affecting our minds. And again, if you're watching this for the very first time, you, the viewer, like the characters, are trying to work it out. It
Yeah.
does have that effect of bringing you in. And I just, again, thought it was really weird to remove all uses of the sonic screwdriver. That was the original sonic screwdriver, which is just a pen light. I realize that. And that's very
Well,
boring, but
yeah, but I
Yeah.
can I
by
can also
modern standards.
yeah, well, I can
Like,
also think because RTD has also said he didn't like the fact that most sonic screwdrivers looked like they were guns, so he did the TV remote version, and
I
it's like,
really hated that.
you
Like, I
know,
hate that.
Yeah, I
right
don't
now
agree with that.
right now I'm holding up a pen, and you know what? Does if I do this, does this look like a gun at all?
No, it
No.
never looked like a gun. It looked like a freaking screwdriver.
Well,
Like a
this is one of those.
screwdriver made sense.
This is one of those pens that I got as like a freebie because I was at a trade show. So it's got like and it's for a contracting. So it's got a little ruler
Yeah.
and a little level, and there actually is a little screwdriver. And I know what you're all thinking. Yes, we're going to be becoming the Doctor Who Chicago Whovians United who love pens. So keep an eye out for that. But
Yeah, we should get our own pens.
I have a question, or not really a question, but a suggestion actually.
yes.
Um, although they used the music for the master for the war chief, one of the things I was thinking when I was looking at him, he made me think of the one, not the master, but who is that other? There was another, I think the time meddler. I know he's in the Big Finish ones, but I
Right, the
think
monk.
in something or other they had a person who was a physical time meddler, and I can't remember which episode it was, but I think it was one of the little tales of something or other. And that's who I was thinking it was, that the war chief was.
Yeah. Yeah, and that actually makes a lot more sense. But I'm kind of one of those. It's like to me it's I love I know it's one of the cool things about Doctor Who is you can kind of go like, oh, is the war chief the master? Is he the monk? Is he the Ronnie? Because hey, we don't know.
Mhm.
Is he a future incarnation of the Doctor, perhaps? Why not? But no, I think for this story, even outside the context of when it was shown, I think it helps because you want to have the introduction of someone who, okay, the Doctor knows him and he has access to all these, basically they call them side rats, but they're basically just cheap. They're TARDISes from Timu, basically. And it I and I think that
Well, that's another thing that didn't get explained in the colorized version properly, which was that these were machines with a remote control, limited lifespan. They were, like you say, downgraded TARDISes. But anyway,
yeah, and it's
Yeah, it's kind of insulting that they think like, oh, if we make it like that, no one over a certain age is going to sit through like 4 hours. And yeah, there is some issues with the pacing, but I just want to point out that my generation also will like easily sit through all of Lord of the Rings extended edition 9 hours. So we will, if the story is good, there is no problem sitting through it.
yeah,
And I, I
This
mean,
is what remote controls were made for.
yeah, I mean,
If you're watching the war games and the parts that you don't like, you fast forward through that.
and no one says you have to binge it. Like taking and doing it bits, like Oppenheimer being like Kristen Nolan being like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make a 3 hour movie, but also at the same time, I'm not gonna put in an intermission. And if you don't put it intermission in, like if you put an intermission in, like I will be upset. Like I was like, are you serious? I'm like immediately was like, well, I'm not gonna see this in theaters because I don't want to sit through a 3 hour movie where I can't pause it and there's no breaks because even like when Doctor Who came out and stuff, like this was a time when you had 3 hour movies, but they put in intermission. Like people like having breaks. Breaks are
mhm.
nice.
Yeah, and
Like,
yeah, and I think too, when Russell T Davies announced that they're going to colorize episodes, I was actually quite thrilled because it would be interesting to see because unlike what a lot of fans will say, they actually designed it in color. So a lot of what we saw on the color version was actually the way the sets looked because they had color photos. Um, and
it was
to me, that's
so
actually
fun.
helpful because that's how you engage. But when you start taking pieces out or doing the very heavy-handed, I look at the Doctor's trial, in the black and white, there's that gurning, lonely, because you realize this is not good. Here, it's almost triumphant. It's like, yes, this is the Doctor, and he's won. And no, he hasn't. He's lost. He's lost his companions. He's losing his ability to travel to time. He's losing his face. Um, and the sad thing is, he's going to have to hang out with Sergeant Benton. I mean, that's a punishment worse than death.
Well,
He
yeah, the
literally,
other
I
thing
mean,
about
three is like
He
so
doesn't
upset because
eventually
he's
get
like,
Lethbridge Stewart.
yeah. He's
I
like,
think one of the
no,
things
I
with
just
the
like,
trial, I'm sorry. I think one of
he's
the
just as
things at the
like,
trial where they after he gives his speech and they say you've raised difficult issues, we have to go off and think about it. And I love that scene where he's on the floor playing the cards.
Hmm.
oh
There's
yeah, the card scene. And then it comes back
yeah,
and they're like, yeah,
that
we're
is
gonna
just
punish you.
so that's the second Doctor. That was
And this,
things. There were moments in this story that were the second Doctor that were removed.
yeah, the second
And
Doctor.
that's doesn't do service to that portrayal, Patrick Troughton's Doctor.
Yeah. I mean, there's only been one time where the special edition of anything was better than the original, and that is Day of the Daleks. Because when it came out in DVD, the production when it was originally produced, they hadn't done Daleks in a while, and it was bad. It was really bad. So they did a special edition for the DVD. If you go to Tubi and YouTube, you can actually see the special edition where they filmed some special stuff. They did a better edit. And all I'm saying to everyone is, if you want to see the special edition of Day of the Daleks, but you want to watch it with others, just put October 5th on your calendar. Just do that. Trust me, it's in the works, and I have a reason
Cool.
why I'm doing it. And you can, if you would like to, make a guess in the comments below. If any of my fellow Whovians would like to guess, we can talk about that after recording. But yeah, so okay, so would it be, so on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being, yes, we absolutely should show this to other people, plan a screening of this for other people to watch, or 1 being, are you freaking kidding me? I don't think people should watch this at all. In fact, schedule Space Babies instead. How would you rate this story?
A
Zero
one, a
option.
one, but don't watch Space Babies instead.
Can I rate it 0 and suggest that we literally gather up every physical copy of it, put it in a dumpster, light it on fire? Because this was horrendous.
Well, I will put out a bid to, because this is available on BBC iPlayer, because the 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 DVD and Blu-ray in England comes out in April. It comes to US in May. Now, rumor has it that they may be adding the black and white to the color version. So here's what I'm going to suggest.
Do not
For
buy it.
anyone, a couple things I'm going to suggest. One, if there are any hackers out there, break into the BBC and have the color version deleted. Secondly, maybe buy a used copy of the War Games. It's a 3 DVD set. 2 of them are the episodes, and the third is a whole bunch of background featurettes, which are or if you don't, if you really must stream the black and white on Tubi, stream it on YouTube. I think BritBox still has classic available, so you can subscribe to that. Um, but yeah, it's why I don't normally, when it comes to things to screen, I usually think it through. And especially if it's something um, that is slightly controversial. So like back in January, we all publicly saw the Celestial Toymaker. And as I'm promoting it, I've had 1 or 2 people say, "Oh, the style is crappy." And I had to explain it. Well, yeah, maybe you think the style is crappy, but other people have the right to see it to you know and
And that's a different one because there the story is faithfully told,
mhm.
and you can watch either the black and white or the color animation. And yeah, you can then ask yourself, I mean, for example, I originally wasn't going to buy that, but then I did because I wanted that copy of the story. And as you pointed out, Gordon, in a weird way, the animation is weird, but it makes sense for that particular story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like
And
the anime.
it would be interesting if you did an animated version of the War Games. If you did the entire story, but
Mm-hmm.
animated it and had it in color, that would be interesting because you could add some more interesting special effects with the animation. As long as you keep the not a 90-minute animation, but a animation that is the full original story.
Yeah, or if you do it as like if you do an edit, make it like maybe two or three 90-minute movies where you get the full scope and effect. Because I think um I think the one thing, like I said, I saw the Daleks in color, and to me it was a good edit of a story that I really didn't care for. So it's hard for me, and I also don't think Terry Nation is that good a writer. Yeah, come at me, classic fans. I'm saying it out loud. There's only been two stories that he's ever done a halfway decent job on: Dalek Invasion of Earth and Genesis of the Daleks. That's it. We'll fight, but
I
this
think
is one.
Genesis of the Daleks is probably his best.
Mhm. And what's funny is when we talked about this, somebody mentioned that, yeah, we saw Genesis of the Daleks, the 90-minute edit um, at the theater, because that was a meetup I run. And I can tell you right now that 90-minute edit was also just as crappy because they took out the wrong scenes. Like you'd figure that they'd focus on the political and take out like the scene with the clam and some of the other stuff that is just kind of nation filler, and they didn't. And it is a very it kind of has that weird it 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 it's kind of it has the same problems, and I think it's on the Blu-ray, the for the Tom Baker first season Blu-ray, the omnibus version. But I think like this,
See, that's another story that you can't. That's another story that you need to have the story unfold because you really understand where the Daleks come from and the choice the Doctor has to make of whether or not to commit genocide.
hmm yeah, and here this is kind of a um, I think it's safe to say we all did not like this edit. Would that be a safe thing to say?
That is exactly accurate.
Thank
If
you.
I could, if I could,
The universe would have gone on just fine if this edit had never existed.
Yeah, and I think too
if
that
if I could, I would create a antivirus that would literally just seek this out and delete it from every like computer. Like I just want a virus that we can delete this from every computer, ruin
Mhm.
it completely. I literally want to gather up. You know what they did with the E.T. Atari game? I need like that to happen to this, but maybe, also like burn it first and then bury the ashes. Like, I don't want you to be able to dig this up later. It's so bad.
I mean, somebody thinks, oh, they're just, there's certain moments. People just want to see the cool moments. And I'm like, no, I mean, I'm a person that watches a lot of anime programs, and what used to capture me into the anime stuff on Toonami was two things: the music, and I would start watching it. I love the animation, but what kept me in any of those shows was they told stories that
Mhm.
immediately hooked me, and I have to watch every week because of the story. And Doctor Who, it's never mattered how good or bad the special effects were, as long as you had a good story. Here, the edit ruins the story.
Yeah, and even the special effects, I don't mind the special effects because, like, I know that they were on a budget that I think if you look at it, more like you're watching if you keep in mind that they are building sets more as if they're on a stage, like so you have to think of it more as a play
Mhm.
and not like the big Broadway productions where we don't have as much money, so we can't do the special effects and stuff. So we're working with what we have and the constraints. And also, I could tell that they're trying to make it so ages, they're trying to think about, I could tell, the age. How is this going to age in the future? Like they wanted to look sci-fi, but also like not too out there.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I really do appreciate that I could tell like there was a lot and thought and effort, and what they have makes sense. Like like there is thoughts into how this should look, and how, and they're using technology from the time, and they're like, okay, so this is the technology we currently have. How would that look? How do we think that will look going further?
Mhm.
There is thought and like thought behind everything. I feel like they do in the old episodes, like how the scenes are built. And I can tell like they wanted to kind of create a classic look, and it does not feel like anything is cheap,
Mhm.
nor the dog behind me. It doesn't feel cheap at the end of the day. Like I could tell, like, yeah, like they can't have the special effects we have now, but I mean, like what they've done practically really does work.
Mhm. Yeah, and when you consider, it's one of the reasons how I've learned to love classic Doctor Who, because you're dealing with, um, for a limited budget, you're dealing with maybe three or four standing sets, five roles, five speaking roles, three cameras, and sometimes there's a fourth and a fifth for more complicated shots. You have to be willing to get it done, rehearsed and done. Um, I think this might have been. I think this was still, they were rehearsing and recording in a week. After this, it would be two episodes in a fortnight. So in like 7 days, you had to learn your lines, block out, do your staging, and then you had to go in front of the camera. Maybe if you were lucky, you did some location shooting, but it was a grinder. And I think, to Ruth's point, there's a lot of passion and thinking into what goes into this. And I think what this edit does is, Harmon, you'd mentioned that for the cool, you watch this for the cool moments. Most of the cool moments are taken out of it, or
Yeah.
they're recontextualized. So like, the doctor meeting someone of his own race. This is the second time, because the first was the monk, but the second time, this should have serious, this should be serious. You don't need that weird, goofy, calliope John Sim master music. That's basically saying, hey, look. Even Phil Collinson in an interview said, oh yeah, we're playing with that fan theory that the war chief is a master. No, just stick to the story. This isn't about what you interpret the story to be. This is what the story is telling you. Um, a story like Dot and Bubble, which for those of you who are watching, we actually watched and discussed a few weeks ago, that has different
It was a
meanings
week
to
ago.
people. It's very different. It's not as straight. It's a very straightforward story, but it's layered with meanings. And
Yeah,
there's
and
nothing.
it's interesting with that one, for example, after you watch it, and if we had a discussion about it, but then also to go watch the Doctor Who Unleashed and hear Russell Davies and what he wanted it to be.
Mhm.
It's just that too is a layer where you can agree or disagree even with what Russell Davies had in mind with that story. That's what's so interesting about that one. There's different ways to read it
Yeah.
beyond, I think, what he originally intended, but that's because it's such a cool story.
Mhm. And if somebody had edited that, let's say we'll turn it from, I think it's 45 minutes to a half hour.
Mhm.
Hypothetically, Harmon, I'm not suggesting this happened.
No,
Hypothetically, you would end up with a much poorer story, because what do you take out of it, that doesn't fundamentally change the course of the story? It's like, even if you take the scene where, um, Lindy turns the dot against Ricky September. You take that out. You've just changed you've changed a huge character beat, where we learn that no, she's not just dealing with entitlement. She's not just clueless person who is vapid and superficial. She's actually somewhat evil.
yeah, to use Russell Davies' word, she's vile.
Right.
Psycho.
And Yeah, and
Yeah.
without that moment, that was critical for him because up until then, the, the Thought and Bubble was really a story where the Doctor and Ruby are not in it that much. Pepper Bean Lindy, she is the main character,
Hmm.
and we're invested in her survival, and then all of a sudden, oh, she's really not so good. I mean, the whole time you're kind of annoyed with her, but then that's deliberate. That's a critical. You take that out, you change the whole nature of the story and the character, which
Hmm.
is why I think in this story, some of the things that removed from the war games in the edit diminish the story.
Yeah, because it changes the nature of the story. It's less about how people adjust to the fact that they're being used. It's about how people in charge will often manipulate people, they perceive beneath them as turning people into weapons, treating people as means to an end. And it's basically turned into a romp. And I'm being very
Yeah.
generous with that. It
Yeah,
turns it into, um, it really turns it into, it's almost like, yeah, there's a criticism of later Matt Smith episodes where it's like all he does is wave a magic buggy stick and fix everything. And I'm not saying that's true, but there is a sense of, oh yeah, the doctor will automatically fix things. Whereas in this episode, he's kind of a lot of times he's more up against it than he is like an active, I'm going to solve the problem because I'm the hero. I think it's more due to like I think a lot of it is Troughton's performance. It's kind of hard to. He's one of those doctors where I wish there were more of him that were available, that wasn't animated, because he does a lot with nuance and looks and kind of the way he uses his body language.
yeah, and his facial
I
expressions and body language are, like I said, he's very good at that throughout this particular story. But
and
something I was going to mention, I brought up the music before, and you know, there was somebody once who talked about wanting to see, and I don't know if this was done, the Five Doctors, except with the modern music. Like the Five Doctors special would have been so much more palatable if it just didn't have the so-called crappy music it had and had the modern music. And when I heard that, I'm like, no, I don't want you to do that to the Five Doctors.
It's interesting. I don't know if it's come out in the States yet, but I know the season 20 Blu-ray has a third edition of uh of the Five Doctors. I know it's a different music mix. I don't know if they have different music, but that would be interesting to watch. Um,
Yeah, but again, I think the music is not what's right or wrong with it. I can have other issues with the
right.
Five Doctors. I think it was again, it comes back to the story. I don't think the music was so awful. Um, and that's the music, the way it was used in the war games was monotonous. And some of it was just there was a point where I got annoyed with the music in the original war games. But what they did here was worse.
Hmm. Okay, well, let's start, start, closing the conversation. So, would it be safe to say that the color edit has lost the war of the war games?
it was
Yes.
annihilated. It got nuked. Also, they removed the nuclear bomb part.
Neutron bomb, the whole use, the idea,
Yeah,
right?
they removed that threat.
Right. Like I said, why things happened in this colorized version don't make sense because of things missing. Like it's a different story. It's like it's this
It's
rushed,
like
truncated story.
they lost half of the story with what they took out.
It's
And
basic.
unfortunately, without it, it doesn't make sense.
It's basically what Trump has done with his orders to the US government websites, where like they have all this stuff removed and people are like pointing it out and being like, yeah, this doesn't make sense now. Like,
Hmm.
it's just the worst at it.
Okay, so,
Like,
let's kind of bring this to a close. Are there any parting thoughts? And please, no profanity.
Okay, Barbara, you have a
I
parting thought without the profanity.
I wish they would have done a different edit, because the way they edited it, they took out, there were things that they took out that are necessary for the story, but they left in some things that I look at it and I'm like, huh? What was that? Because there were a couple of
Here's
things I don't remember seeing in the original.
yes, they put stuff in and they rearranged things here, which again makes it's so obvious. That's one of the problems with it. I have a closing thought. I'm going to go back to my original idea, which is, to me, this would work. I think you should colorize it, but colorize it. Keep the annoying music, keep the storyline as it was, colorize it, stream it, turn it into a mini series event, but keep the
I
original edit.
I agree with that sentiment. I would love to see the original color because from the beginning, while watching this, I was immediately taken in, and I'm like, I don't know where the story is going, but I know it's going to be really great. And one thing that Gordon and me, when we were talking about this last week, when we watched Hot and Bubble beforehand, we were talking about how like it is definitely something that you don't binge this. You watch like hour or two at a time. Um, and you can watch an hour or two at a time. You kind of take it a little bit slower, and it really does play out really lovely and stuff. Um, it was
Uh,
never meant to, yeah, it was never meant to be something you binge.
Ruth,
It's something you have to take a little bit slower, take an hour or two at a time. But I promise you, watching this episode, it's worth it because it's so well done. It resonates so much with what's going on nowadays and stuff. And I really think it gives you that optimism of, it doesn't take a lot of people to like overthrow evildoers, and it really, I mean, the
I have
message it
one
was
other.
giving back in the day during the Cold War, it really echoes right now with what, our own fascist issues in the US. And I think it really
There's
should be like it can be really a light of hope and really a bright spot that can really show like, yeah, like things are going to get better. We can slog through that. We will slog through this, but then things will get better because we can see where they were when this came out and what happened, and things got better, and it's going to get better for us. But yeah,
Mhm.
watch the original. Just take this one and chuck it to the sun.
Yeah, and I'll end and bring this to the close with the fact that I I am all for colorizing black and white episodes. I think that's one way you get people into um, the new series. In a classic Who rather, is that you at least bring it up to visual standards. And if this edit had done anything to improve the story or even streamline the story, it would be great. The big question that I have for the colorized at War Games is who is it for? Because if you're claiming this is for people who only watch the modern show, you did a really, this is a really poor job. I mean, this is a story that has nuance, and I think it's one of those, as someone who comes from the classic series, where I now understand the complaints where the new series goes too fast or the new series doesn't have build, because you get character beats, you get mood, you get atmosphere, but you also get a gradual build toward the end. Here, it really does feel like it's just somebody picked up like little snippets of film and put them together and said, "Oh, okay, let's do this." I think does a real disservice to the story, and would suggest to everyone that we'll have a link to Tubi and YouTube. In fact, as we're talking earlier this morning, um, there was a mini marathon of 4 Patrick Troughton episodes, including the War Games. So I'll include a link to that down below. Um,
hmm,
and that way you can watch. And again, as Ruth said, don't feel you have to watch all 4 hours at once. You can. Some of us are, if you're bored on a Sunday afternoon, yeah, some of us have done it. I won't mention anyone in this room, but it works better if you just take two episodes and watch them over the period of a week, because what you'll find is you can see where the story is going. Things that are awkward and maybe don't work, you can kind of see, well, okay, you get through those, but you see how everything kind of moves forward. Um, and so with that, um, I'd like to thank Harmon, Ruth, and Barbara for joining us. If you'd like to join us for one of these conversations, we do these every other month. Become a Patreon member. You can become a free member, or if you're a paid member, you can get to have a request. You can request a story we can watch. We can accept not the color edit.
Space Beef.
No. That's no. Do not request that. Or
No.
It's a special tier.
you can request a Big Finish. In fact, a couple months ago we had a great listening party with Death in the Family, Death in the Crown, Death in the Queen. Brains. Anyway, and that led to a viewing of the Androids of Tara. So, just to give you some hints and teasers about what's coming up. On April 14th, we're going to be doing our virtual streaming of the first Ncuti Gatwa episode, The Robot Revolution. If they decide to drop two, we'll watch the second episode, which I think is Lux. In May, May 17th, we have our cosplay congregation. I know that's during ASIN, but sorry, can't help it. We understand, but if you're not going to ASIN, come join us in Elgin. On the 25th, we're doing a couple of ebooks that feature the Peter Capaldi Doctor, and then kind of what'll be I'll be adding some more events to the calendar over the next few weeks. A best way to do it is to subscribe to our email newsletter to get updates. It's buttondown.email@Chicago Doctor Who Meetup. We're using the old name for a while. We're going to switch that shortly. We're at patreon.com, links to everything below. And this summer we're planning a Father's Day screening on Father's Day. And yes, if you're a Doctor Who fan, you know what I'm talking about. We're actually going to be doing a new thing that probably late summer, early fall, it's based on some of the screenings we have here. We're calling it the Deep Dive. And what would happen is you would RSVP, we'll have links to one of the longer classic stories, via Tubi and YouTube for you to watch on your own, because I'm not going to have people sitting in front of a screen for 3 hours. Because the idea is it's like a book club. You watch the episode, and we're going to talk about the episode. We're going to talk about it less than a good episode, but we want to talk about context. In our first selection, speaking of Malcolm Hulke, will be his debut story for season 7, which will be The Silurians, which is I would say it's very relevant now than it was, 1970. But we're also planning an outing to Marie's Candies in Bucktown, because that's conveniently near Open Books and Alien Entertainment. And that way we can go to Alien Entertainment and say, hey, sell us tickets to Chicago TARDIS, because they run Chicago TARDIS. We're also going to be planning, again, another ice cream social at Eiffel Waffle. And we've got some other things that we're also doing our big Dalektober celebration in December. So in October. So remember that whole October 5th thing? Keep that evening clear. Seriously. There's a reason. So again, I want to thank everyone for coming. Please like, share, subscribe. Join us via Facebook, Blue Sky. We've got those links down below. Thank you very much for your time, and we will talk to you all later. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Take care.
Take care.